everyone, and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional. Today in the Confessional, it's such a pleasure to be chatting with Donna Stolzenberg. Donna, to say the least, is an incredible human being. She has recently been awarded the honour of the Victorian Australian of the Year for 2021, and for a very good reason. Donna is the CEO and the founder of the National Homeless Collective and the 6 sub-charities that she has created under its banner, including the Period Project, the School Project, Plate Up Project, Sleeping Bags for Homelessness, and Secret Women's Business. Their new project is the Colour Space, an op shop in Melbourne's north that employs women escaping from the cycle of homelessness and/or domestic violence. Throughout 2020, Donna and the National Homeless Collective have also leaned in to offer on-the-ground support to those affected by the Australian bushfires and those in heavy lockdown in Melbourne's housing towers due to COVID. Donna, a proud Indigenous woman from the Ngurjimi and Mirning country, is the mother of 5 sons and the grandmother of 2. Donna has lived experience of overcoming hardship, single motherhood, and raising a child in the disability sector. She is yet to have a single day off in 2020, and I'm so grateful she joined me here today to talk about her passion for helping those faced with homelessness. Welcome, Donna. So hello and welcome, Donna, to the Good Girl Confessional. How are you?
I'm really well, Sandy. Thank you so much for having me along.
Oh, look, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on the podcast because you have been doing so many extraordinary things for a very long time. In terms of helping women, which is a huge thing for us, but really for helping so many people. So you are, of course, the CEO and the founder of the National Homeless Collective, which is quite an extraordinary organisation.
Thank you.
So how did that come about? Like, tell us your story.
So the National Homeless Collective was actually started by accident. I had no intention of starting a charity, but clearly it's what I was destined to do, and I'm so glad that I did. But it started because I saw a fellow. I was actually out running one morning. I was in Darling Harbour there for a conference, and as I came around the corner, as I was jogging, I saw a fellow on a park bench who I actually had thought had passed away because it was too cold to be there and still be alive. As far as I was concerned, it was absolutely bitterly freezing, and he just had a pair of jeans on and a very thin wind cheater. And the story of how the whole charity started is not quite linear. It didn't sort of start from that point. It was factors that came into play from many years ago that developed the charity. But I guess that was the pivotal moment where I realized that I felt completely helpless. I was in Sydney, which is not where I live. And so I came back to Melbourne and I went to a group that I'd started 12 months earlier called the Melbourne Homeless Support Group, and how that started is another story. But I wasn't working in homelessness services at the time, but I'd started up the group because I was working with people who were experiencing homelessness. And I just said, look, I've just seen this situation in Sydney. Are there any organisations in Melbourne that could do with some blankets or sleeping bags for people? And 2 organisations put their hand up and said, yeah, look, we'd love some. So I started a page called Blanket Melbourne, which has had a name change since, and I put the call out and it went viral, and in 8 weeks I got 3,500 blankets and sleeping bags and delivered every one of them to either an organisation or a person sleeping rough. And from there, the other charities, the sub-charities that we run, kind of spun off from there, because while I was delivering the blankets and sleeping bags one night, I came across a lady sleeping rough outside Flinders Street station, and she discreetly asked me if I had any tampons because she had a period and she had nothing to use for it. And I said, I don't, but I can get you some. So I asked what brand she wanted, what did she like, went over across the road and bought it back. And as soon as I handed them to her, she burst into tears and she just started sobbing. And she disclosed to me that she had been released from prison not long earlier, and a couple of days earlier, and she was sitting there literally bleeding and just couldn't move because she had nothing to use. And she had an access visit the next day with her children who were in foster care. And if she went and stole the tampons, which was her only option, or steal the money to buy them, and got caught, then there would have been no visit, then no reunification, and her life would have changed in a completely different horrific direction purely because of a biological process that she couldn't help having. So I thought, all right, well, this is clearly a problem. And on the back of the support of all the people who gave me the blankets, I just went back and said, look, I think we need to collect sanitary items for women. And we started up the Melbourne Period Project Facebook page. That went viral, and all the other charities that I run spun off from that. But that's the story of how it started.
Wow. Okay. And I have been a follower, I guess, of the Melbourne Period Project for a very long time now, and I thought it was just such an extraordinary thing that you did, which was to really highlight and put into the spotlight that obviously most women have their period at some stage, girls and women, and to not have access to pads, tampons, wipes, anything, during that time, obviously causes, distress and humiliation. And so what you've done for so many women in that field is just extraordinary.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing to think about what happens if you don't have the correct tools to products to manage your period. There's been a lot of studies done on the different ways that people manage menstruation in other cultures and how it differs from the way that we manage it in the Western world. But no one had done a study on what happens when you are within your own culture with expectations and norms that you should be able to manage your period, but you can't. We actually had someone from Monash University do a study on that for us. So nobody was thinking about it because menstruation's hidden. And when we think of homelessness, we think of the old man on the street corner. We don't think of women being out there on the street. So when you put those two things together, homelessness and menstruation, there was just a giant abyss of nothing that nobody was talking about. So I don't know how we got to 2015 before we realized that it was an issue, but sadly, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it's extraordinary and really amazing that, as I said, you shone that spotlight on it, because the moment that you did, I just know how many conversations over the years I've had with different people about that, and that's largely due to you and your work. That people don't stop and think about it. I didn't stop really and think about that until Melbourne Period Project came up on my radar. So it's a really extraordinary thing that you've done.
Well, I often get people almost apologizing to me and saying, sorry, I'm so sorry that I didn't think about this. And I have to remind people that I didn't either until I met her. And she was the one that said, I've got my period, I've got nothing to use for it. And that was when I had that penny drop moment of, oh my goodness, we're not supporting menstruation for women who are sleeping rough or in crisis accommodation. And I did a bit of research to see if there was anything out there that perhaps was already running and that she just didn't know about, but there was nothing. And as soon as we opened up the Melbourne Period Project page, at that point, we were getting up to 400 messages a day from people desperate and organisations that were desperate for what we were doing. And then the stories started to come out of the horror that people had been going through trying to manage their period with nothing. We heard of women going to laundromats to try and find discarded socks. There's often one sock left in a laundry, in a dryer. Women actually reusing tampons, like rinsing them out, squeezing them dry, and then reinserting them, which of course leads to all manner of health issues. Women were stealing, they were using clothing like t-shirts and stuff like that, which is so uncomfortable. One lady even resorted to trying to use leaves as well to manage the menstrual flow. So the stories that came out from there were just unbelievable and just absolutely horrific. So we really pushed to get that public knowledge out there that it was happening, and we needed to support it.
And it kind of had this ripple-on effect because of what you started. It kind of became a movement, I think. So we were starting to see in other charities, and we are still seeing now that other charities have adopted that as well, that the collection as well of sanitary products. For women, because it's so important. And we see that now in Share the Dignity, and we see that now in Orange Sky Laundry, where people go, homeless people can go and wash their clothes, but they can also now, I think, get a toothbrush, but they can get tampons or pads or sanitary items. So what you've done effectively has had a ripple-on effect, not just for the charities that you've created, but right across the spectrum, where people are really thinking about women and their needs?
Well, that was one of the reasons that we put the word period in it, because we wanted people to be talking about it. And I felt that it was important. A lot of people will tell me off for that and they go, well, it should have been called the Melbourne Menstruation Project. However, I get that that's a technical name, but we usually talk about, girls starting their period. And the period is a common word that's still used and people understand what it is. And I felt that it was more commonly used and more popular than menstruation, and that it was, more fitting for the title, and, that's okay. So when we put the word period in it, we started to have that conversation. We opened up that dialogue on periods and made people comfortable to talk about it. But one of the other things that we did, which we felt was important too, is that we support all people. So we support non-binary people, transgender men. We support anybody who menstruates. So it doesn't matter what gender they are or aren't. If they're menstruating, then we support them.
And thank you for clarifying that. And I should have actually said that. So, a lot of people actually do menstruate, and it's not just women, obviously. So thank you very much for clarifying that, because it is really important too. And for anyone out there listening who might need those services, if you menstruate, there is help out there. So that's important.
It is, and we're hopefully changing that dialogue as well to include everybody. But it's not the erasure of women. I get told off for that again all the time, that I'm erasing women by saying people who menstruate rather than women. We're not erasing women. What we're doing is we're including other genders that also menstruate. So I'm female. I identify as female. I identify as a woman. I'm a menstruator. I don't feel that I've erased myself or anyone. It's just being more inclusive of people who have actually had more of a barrier to accessing period products because of their gender. So if someone is transgender, transgender men who were born with female reproductive parts do have periods, but present to the world as a male, and they find it very hard to go to services to access menstruation products, because people will ask, well, who's it for? It's not for you, obviously. Your name's Dave and you're a dude. And then Dave has to disclose, well, actually, I'm transgender, which means that person has had to disclose something that they might not have wanted to. So we also try and ask services to not ask questions on who is this for if a person is approaching them to access the products that we supply.
I think that's fantastic. And the other thing too, of course, is, and it's so important nowadays to have that kind of inclusion, and for people to not be fearful in coming forward who are in need of some support and some help. Regardless of gender, as you say, but also too in that realm, I find it really interesting that people have said to you that you're trying to erase women. I mean, I don't feel like that at all. I think if anything, I would think, or I would like to think, that as women we can be more nurturing and kind and open to all peoples in the community, and that doesn't erase us at all.
Exactly, and that's the same way that I feel about it. It's about inclusion, not erasure. So if you come to us and say, look, I'm a woman and I need sanitary items because I'm having my period, I'm not going to turn around and say, no, you're a person. You need sanitary items. No, you're a woman. You feel like a woman, that you're a woman. That's great. I am. And it's just being inclusive of people who, anywhere on the gender spectrum, who identify as male, female, transgender, neither, whatever. So we just support anyone who needs it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And you guys, I mean, it's not just the Melbourne Period Project or the National Homeless Collective, but there are, underneath the National Homeless Collective, there's like 6 sub-charities that you guys have created, that's incredible.
There is, and each one of those started because when we'd start one project, it would actually lead us to realizing that there was another issue that wasn't being addressed. The same way that starting, it was called Blanket Melbourne, but now it's got the clunkiest name for a charity, Sleeping Bags for Homelessness, but it gets the message across exactly what it is. If we called it Sleeping Bags Melbourne, people would be ringing us asking how much, because they want to go camping. So we had to put the word homelessness in there, and we prefer that term rather than the homeless. And once we started that, then that's when I met that lady outside Flinders Street, and I realized that there was an issue. Then when we started the Melbourne Period Project, and we started to have women coming in and helping us make the packs up, we actually started to work for the Dole project. And there's a little bit of a story behind that as well. But we realised then that there were issues around the support given to children who are from the families who are experiencing homelessness, especially around children who've had to leave home because of domestic violence and because for any other reason that they can't access their school items. Very often it's because they've had to flee quite suddenly. The perpetrator's still back at home. They can't go back there, and they started to miss school because they didn't have the right items for school, or there was poverty and the parents couldn't afford to pay for things like school camps and swimming lessons. So we do all that as well. We get the book list, the camp list, fill that out. We work with Launch Housing on the Pathways project to make sure that the children's identity is protected as well. But we listen to the organisations that have that direct contact with these children to see exactly what it is that they need. And we trust the organisation. If they say that there is a child that needs this certain item, we don't question it. And that's what really divides us. Well, not divides us, sorry, what makes us differ from a lot of other charities and larger charities is that we have no red tape, bureaucracy, or wait times. If we get an email that a child needs something, I get the email, we just go buy it. And if it alleviates poverty and the discomfort of homelessness, then we're allowed to buy that. We're allowed to give that item to that person, and it can happen same day. There's no such thing as costings with us. But my husband and I were both foster carers as well, and we had a lot of kids come through who lived with us, and we saw the difference between the children who, had gone from having nothing or very little to being able to have everything they needed for school, and how much more comfortable it made school for them, and how much more likely they were to want to participate in their homework, to do their homework, and to go on school camps and things like that. So the school project was really incredibly important as well. And the others started after that. So once we had the women in the warehouse working, we realized at that point that there was a disconnection from people who were sleeping rough to moving into housing, a disconnection in food and cooking and nutrition, because people were used to going to food vans or having passers-by give them food. So when they did get a house, they weren't cooking, they weren't looking after their own nutritional needs because it had been so long since they'd had to. So we started the Plate Up project, and that had the dual role of reintroducing that love of food and cooking and making recipes that were easy to replicate, tasty, cheap, but very, very nutritious, and also adding work skills in as well so that people had a better chance of finding a job. Then came the Carla Space, which is the op shop where we employ women there. So getting ahead of the story.
I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that you could start, one charity that does so much for everyone, but the fact that there are 6 sub-charities under that which are doing kind of extraordinary things is mind-blowing. So in terms of the Carla Space, because you've mentioned that now, so let's jump into that, because when you mentioned the Carla Space, we had chatted before briefly by email, which is fantastic. And when you started talking about the Carla Space and I was really looking into it, I think this is just such an extraordinary project that you have started. It is a charity, but it's an extraordinary, life-changing project for so many women.
It is, and it's quite an innovative project because we are the first people to have done this, and we've actually had a lot of research put into it and to ascertain that we were the first. And we only did that because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we thought if someone else had tried this before, we'd like to learn from them first. So we went looking, and just like the Period Project, it was something that no one had really thought of. But what I found with working with the women at in the Work for the Doll project was that there were significant barriers to them finding and keeping employment. There was a reason they were on Work for the Doll. There was a reason that they weren't working in paid employment, and I needed to dig a bit deeper and find out what that was. And there was a lot of clarity that happened one morning when I received a phone call from one of the women who was doing the project. And she said to me that, she said, look, I'm going to be late today. I can't come in on time. And I said, oh, that's fine, but are you okay? She said, yeah, no, I'm fine, but I sleep in a park and it rained last night and everything I own is soaking wet and I need to go to a laundromat and dry my clothes first, but I don't have any money, so I've got to go and beg for some money first so I can operate the laundromat. And I just thought to myself, well, she's just disclosed to me an incredible amount about her personal situation that I felt she shouldn't have had to tell me. But she did, to put in context as to why she was going to be late. And I'd known her for a while at that point, so she felt comfortable telling me that. And although I knew that she was experiencing homelessness, it never occurred to me that, you know, she was literally sleeping in a park. And I thought to myself, if you were working anywhere else, you've either got to tell your boss exactly what's going on, thus disclosing your innermost secret details and basically jeopardizing your own security, or you have to lie about it and make up some reason why. And we all know what it's like when you have to call your boss, even if you're deathly sick or the kids are sick. Ringing up to say you're not coming in, there is so much guilt around that, even if you know legitimately you can't come in. And I thought, well, if we're adding that guilt aspect and forcing people to lie or disclose things, then that's got to be one of the reasons why people aren't able to stick to work when they're living in that chaotic environment. So I had a few meetings with the girls that we had at the Work for the Dole project, and we discussed some of the reasons why, and there was an open discussion. Why did you not keep this job? Why did you, not go to that interview? And there were a myriad of reasons, but every single one of them was a barrier that could not be moved at that time, hence the rain that day. That lady was living in a park. She had her name down to get a place in crisis accommodation, but there weren't any available. So it wasn't like she wasn't trying. There was another lady who, didn't get any sleep because she just got the ABO out on her ex, who literally tried to kill her, but he'd made bail. And she knew that if he found her, that she wouldn't be getting up to come to it. So she's awake all night. Children scared because of previous family violence. People who have PTSD. People, so many reasons. And I said to them, well, what would the perfect job look like for you? If you could create something, what would it look like? And one of the things that came back time and again was, I just can't start and finish when they want me to. So what we did with the colour space was we removed all start and finish times, and we just thought, let's see what happens. It was an experiment. We thought we'd see how it would go, but the outcome was far better than what we had even anticipated. When we removed the main barrier to employment and just let women work when they could without having to tell us that they weren't coming in, or having to tell us that they needed to leave early or were going to be late. With us, there was no such thing as late. There was no such thing as leaving early. Each employee got 15 hours per week. We negotiated the days that they would work. And if they could make it in, they made it in. If they couldn't make it in, they didn't come in. And we found that gradually, every single person that we employed ended up extending their hours and coming in for the full 15 hours per week. As they navigated the chaos that they were going through, they still had this job where they had a sense of purpose, and they had somewhere, as one of the ladies said to me, she said, this is the only place I go that's not an appointment, and I love coming here, and it's so welcoming, and I'm needed here. So it wasn't pity work, it was actual work. There were jobs to do, there were tasks, there were things that needed to get done. And every person that we employed had certain jobs. And the thing that we alleviated was that every job that we had wasn't time critical or mission critical. So it could be done when they came in. And if it didn't get done that day, that was okay. And I know that a lot of other organisations have said, well, that's fine for you because you've got volunteers who can buffer everything else. But, we can't do that here. And that's actually not true. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is working with several key government organisations to rethink the way that we frame our employment positions. Because what we haven't done before is create an entire position that has no time or mission critical tasks that are still important tasks, that are still tasks that add value to the organisation, but don't need to be done on that particular day at that particular time. And if you create a position around that, and I've worked for government for many, many years. I've worked in the private sector for many years, and every single job that I've ever had has had components in it that were not time or mission critical, that could be formed into another job, another role for somebody else, and we can create positions there. So the Carla space was an experiment that did extremely well, and it's still continuing, but we can only employ a certain amount of women. People have looked at us and gone, well, this is brilliant. We love that you do this. Keep going. We're like, 6 people out of thousands is not going to make a dent. We need the rest of society to start thinking the way that we're thinking, and start looking at how you can employ people who can't start and finish exactly when you need them to. So this is not going to just be us doing this. I'm on a mission to make sure that government departments and large corporations start thinking about how they can be more inclusive of people with housing insecurity.
Wow, that's brilliant. And we should say, for those who are not aware yet, and of course, obviously, I will be putting up lots and lots of links, but I will say that the Carla space is actually an op shop, and it is based in Melbourne's north. And the idea of the op shop is that women can come and work in there doing the jobs that you really need to get done, and they're paid over that 15 hours, however many hours they can work, that's what they're paid for.
That's right. Yeah. So they're paid for the hours that they work. So they're incentivized to come in because if they work 10 hours, they get paid 10 hours. If they work 5, they get paid 5. And so every single piece of clothing that we sell becomes somebody's wage, 100% of that item. It's not 100% after costs or after profits or whatever. It's if you buy something for $10, that becomes someone's wage for $10. So we need more people to shop with us, for starters. If you want to support us, make us your charity of choice for your clothing, rather than just donating your clothes to us and then going back to Myer or Target and buying more for yourself. Come to us, because the issue with that is that these clothes I can't pay someone with a dress. I can't say, here's your wage, you get 2 dresses and a pair of jeans this hour. I need to convert those clothes into money. So if people shop with us, then that creates the wages for people. But so far, so good. But we really would like to scale what we're doing and extend it. And it is a transferable model. So we're looking at opening up more Carla spaces around, but we want everyone else to take on that challenge as well and look at creating positions that can be done by people who can't show up at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 o'clock. It's not actually that hard.
Yeah. And, it raises kind of a really important point as well, that a lot of people have this kind of certain view about, as you said earlier, about what a person who is going through housing challenges and people within the homeless community, people have this kind of skewed view that, as you said, it's only sort of this old man down on the corner or whatever. But in actual fact, there's a huge rise at the moment for women over the age of 50 finding themselves displaced, finding themselves without a bed to sleep in.
That's right. Yeah, the women over 50 are the fastest moving cohort into homelessness at the moment, and they have been for a few years. This was a disaster we could see coming, and nobody did anything about it. So it's up to us to do something about that now. Homelessness is very disproportionate to what the average person would think it is. The rough sleepers, the people on the street, really account for only about 6 or 7% of all homelessness. There's a lot of different levels and tiers of homelessness, but it still means insecurity of tenure. The person can't afford to pay the rent. There's rental insecurity, which is a massive problem right across this country. In all capital cities of this country, and I think excluding Canberra, every single one of them is in the top 20 of the world's most what's the term, like hardest to rent place. We actually hit the top 20 for all capital cities, which is disgusting. Rental insecurity in every single one of our capital cities in the top 20 of all countries in the world. So we have to look at that now, because that crisis is only going to get worse. With middle-aged women, what we're seeing is that perfect storm of having very little superannuation to rely on. They generally tended to not be the full-time worker. They were staying home looking after the children. We didn't have the compulsory superannuation when they were younger and working, so they will have less superannuation, more time off having kids. And if your marriage breaks down and you only get half the cost of your house, because of the price of houses, you can't buy the other half anymore. You've gone over that age bracket where a bank will lend you money. You can only work part-time, aging bodies, lots of different factors that are coming into play that mean that the women will rent for a while, and then they use up all the money from the sale of the house, and then it's nothing. And they're finding it hard to get work, and it really is quite a disaster. But overcrowded dwellings, insecurity of tenure, and like couch surfing, students, domestic violence are major factors in homelessness as well. So it's not just the people on the street.
And it's quite interesting, I think, too, that some people will be really shocked to find out too, that you can't always tell who someone is, just from looking at their externals. So there are people, who are working in corporate jobs who are struggling to hold on to rent, as you say, or are going through domestic violence situations where they at any minute will need to flee with their children, or by themselves, and they will literally have nothing except what they're wearing.
Exactly. And domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It's not like a socioeconomic problem. We're not just seeing it in the lower socioeconomic areas. It is a problem everywhere, and in every occupation as well. There are women who have partners who are police officers or detectives who are experiencing domestic violence, and men as well. Men are also victims. They're just generally more likely to be a victim of another male. So it's male to male domestic violence. So what we're looking at is male violence. That is what we need to address in that area. But yeah, it can happen at any time. I know of a lady who was working at one of the major universities, and nobody had any idea that for 3 months she slept in the stairwell of the university because of domestic violence. She had to leave. She had nowhere to go. So she left the house that morning, went to work, and had nowhere to go after. So she waited until everyone had gone, and she curled up in the stairwell, and she was there for 3 months. And she'd go to the local swimming pool and have a shower and, hide a bag of clothes there. Nobody had a clue, not even her friends and family. And she was just too scared and too worried to actually tell anybody. Domestic violence, you look around your workplace, there's going to be someone there that's suffering from it, and probably someone that's causing it. And it still is a huge problem. 45% of all women experiencing homelessness are there because of domestic violence, and that is a massive number, and it's completely unacceptable. So it's something, homelessness is a multifaceted systemic issue. It's never one thing that causes it, or rarely one thing that causes it. However, the system thus far has treated people like a category, and you get support if you fit this category. You don't get support if you don't fit this category. Whereas we take the approach where we support people as an individual. And okay, what is your particular circumstance? What was your pathway in? Because then we can help find that pathway out, rather than say, look, well, we can only help you 9 to 5. You don't fit this. You didn't live here. You're not this age. Well, we can't help you. So the system as well is so incredibly disjointed. It's impossible for us as services to navigate. So I don't know how we're expecting anyone else who's going through trauma to actually navigate the system as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's, that puts the human face on it as well, right? Because as you say, it's really tough for a lot of organizations out there. And you guys, obviously more recently have really, really leaned in as well with things like people who have suffered due to bushfires, and people who are really struggling because of COVID-19. So there's this extra layer on top of all the other things that you do. You've leaned in and you've really helped people who weren't expecting they would need help.
Yeah, and one of the things that's enabled us to do that was because we were an immediate relief organisation. As I was saying before, there's no red tape, there's no bureaucracy. So if something needs to be done, we can get it done that day or the next day. We'll get an email from someone saying that they need something for a client. We can just get it done. For example, we got an email from an organisation 2 days ago, and they have a client who's been released from prison recently. They'd managed to find bond for her, but couldn't find 2 weeks rent in advance. The real estate agent wasn't going to hold the property. They email us, paid, done. Client gets the house. And with the bushfires and with COVID, one of the reasons that we were called on and we were so successful in helping people was because we have that immediate response model where we just jump in and just get things done. We've got an incredibly large volunteer crew who are at the ready, and we can just put an email out, put a post up on Facebook, and then we'll get hundreds of people mobilized, ready to go. Logistics is not my forte, but I've had to learn pretty quick how to get goods in and out to all areas of Victoria during the bushfires within the same day. Same thing with Queensland, ACT. We just managed to get it done. COVID was a particular challenge, but because of all the legislation and regulations around what we could and couldn't do, but we're an emergency, a crucial service. So we were still allowed to operate. So when the towers went into lockdown, we were there straight away with nappies and formula for anybody who needed it. And because that was one of the things that the government hadn't thought of, was there's babies up there that need nappies and formula. So we were able to just jump in and get it done. And that's just the way we operate. And I think us staying as a grassroots charity has really helped that. I know I've always said that if I get to the point where this charity is built so high that I can't be there on the ground delivering these items, and I can't be there to take that phone call or answer that email, then I've built something that I didn't want and probably isn't as effective. We tend to grow outward with our support. We still have that immediate response. There's no tiers to get something that you need from us, which I think is really important as well.
I think that actually that's it's really a valid point, because we don't think about that. I mean, I suppose there are some charities in this country, I suppose, and around the world that have grown so substantially over many, many years that I agree. I think that probably the people at the top don't have the same overview anymore of what's happening on the ground. And that is really on the ground is where people really need support and help.
That's exactly what is wrong with so many of the support services at the moment. There are too many layers from the actual support to the person, or the person to the support. And the message gets lost in translation, and then it just becomes a bunch of words, and there's no emotion, there's no human at the other end of it. It's just a request now, or it's just an appointment now. And we avoid that at all costs. We want to know that we're still supporting people, and that we still see them as people, not as a number or a client, or it's a person who actually needs our support. And we're never more than one person removed from the actual person in need. The only reason that we are removed by one is because of the privacy regulations. So we do a lot of work where we are right at the front line, where we're picking up women who've experienced domestic violence and putting them in hotels and continuing to support them. But there are situations, especially around children, who are removed and with their parent, or sometimes removed into foster care. We do not need to meet the children. We do not need to know their names, who they are. We trust the organisations at the front line to ascertain what the child needs. They know what we can provide, and it's one email away, and we will be able to get the item. We drop it off to the worker, and then the worker passes it on to the child. But it really is important that we don't have too many layers and levels of the avenues to get to support, because you completely, it's not cost effective. You're employing people to tell people there's no money. So the message goes up the chain, and then someone there goes, up, no money, because it's all spent on wages for people to tell people there's no money left for what's happening on the bottom. So we have very, very few costs as a result of that as well. Huge volunteer base, but we don't spend money to tell people that there isn't any money left. And that's, we're really effective at the financial donations that we get. We're really effective at turning those into things that people need very, very cost effectively. In fact, our accountant often looks at our books and is like, I don't know how you guys run this so cheaply, but it's fantastic. So we call in favours all the time as well.
Well, favours are a good thing, right? Absolutely. And because it's such an extraordinary cause, I'm sure there's so many people who do want to help, and organisations that want to help you. And so it's really great that you've kind of, I'm a huge believer in collaboration. And I think the collaboration of humans really gets, when people start to collaborate, amazing things happen. So that's really good. If you've got organisations out there who are happy to kind of, be able to give you things that you really need in order to help other people, it's amazing.
Yeah, and we still always need more. So if anyone's listening to this and thinks that they might be able to help us, definitely get in touch. A lot of organisations will have a giving day where they'll get their staff, and staff are allowed to have a day a year. And they come to us like in a crowd, and it's very hard for the charity to handle that and navigate that. 30 people rocking up at once, when what we actually needed was one person for 30 days rather than 30 people all at one time. There's only so many emails you're going to help me with in one day, but over the course of a month, you might be able to help more. But there are things like, we've called on organisations to help us out with some legal matters. If we're starting a new project, we might need to know, can we legally do this? So we'll tap into their legal department, IT department. There are so many things that, graphic designers, things like that people can help us with. So the financial donations obviously are crucial, because I can't turn a bundle of dresses into a food hamper for somebody. I need to be able to have the cash to do that, or pay for a hotel room for someone fleeing family violence, or rent bond in advance, that sort of thing. But there are talents out there that pretty much every organisation could loan to us that we would find really, really useful. So it's always important to let people know that. And in return, we do what we call homeless awareness sessions for corporations as well. So we can go in and talk about homelessness, how to help, myths, facts, things like that, so people get more of an awareness around it too.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so if anybody is listening out there, and if you have either you're got a talent that you can share and volunteer, or you've got an organization where you really think, we can lean in and really help these guys, because, as I said, there's one blanket, but there's 6 sub-charities under there, all doing extraordinary work for so many people, a lot of humans right across Melbourne and beyond, because this is not just in Melbourne.
No, we're national. So the only area that we don't currently reach is Western Australia. And the reason for that is there is a fantastic charity over there called Perth Homeless Support Group. And we met up with them within our first year. I went over and met Ron and Michael, the guys who run that. Delivered some sleeping bags and that with them. We've been in touch with them, and they're absolutely amazing. And they're pretty much us, but over in Western Australia, but they just do Perth. And there's Essentials for Women who look after the sanitary items over there. So they've really got it together over in Perth. And I think the only one we could probably assist with would be the school project, and we might move that over there. But we are all across the country. I just flew up and back from Brisbane yesterday, actually, and we're supporting a couple of DV victims up there. We currently have our team in Darwin shopping for, I think, about 118 children who are displaced, so they have something for Christmas. And we've been supporting that organisation. This will be our 4th year supporting them. We send school supplies and sanitary supplies right through outback Australia, right through those hard to reach areas where a packet of pads is going to cost $20, and make sure that the communities out there have access, especially our Indigenous communities as well. They've got access to sanitary items and school items. Our sleeping bags go all over the country. So it's not just Melbourne that gets bitterly cold, and we give out about 2,500 sleeping bags a year, and even that's not enough. I mean, it seems like a high number, but it really isn't. And we do, not all projects run at all times. Like sleeping bags sort of closes for now. We have our summer sleeping bags that we give out, but that reopens every March and runs through to about November each year. The Plate Up project still runs, but that runs 3 times a year for about 12 weeks. And the Carla space is obviously always open. That's the op shop. Period project goes non-stop, and National Homeless Collective itself just continues to tick along. And the school project is another one that keeps going non-stop as well. But we started off as a little Melbourne charity that gave out a few blankets, and now we're national and helping. And thing is, we're still getting requests from everywhere, from all sorts of organisations, like right up far north Queensland, and we just can't reach up there yet at the moment, because funding's the problem, as well as having people on the ground up there where they need support too.
And for you to be able to train some, volunteers and have people on the ground who really understand what it is that, what is their purpose and why they're doing it, and how they can best reach people. So, and this is, of course, is why money is so critical.
Exactly. You cannot run a modern day charity on on nothing. You just simply can't do that. I get people don't understand that charities are businesses that make no money. I still have to pay public liability. I still have to pay my workplace insurance. I have to pay all sorts of insurances. There's the rent on the Carla space. There's the electricity as well. I get emails from people all the time saying that they would like to donate money, but they don't want it to go into administrative costs, because we're a charity, we should be able to just turn it into something. And I think to myself, well, you just emailed me, and I'm looking at that email on a computer that I had to buy, and I'm looking at over the internet that I have with a service provider that I have to pay so I can get the internet, electricity I have to use. So you've literally cost me money to tell me that you don't want to donate any money. And people, I get that people have a distrust with charities, but the way that I like to kind of use a bit of an analogy is, people often say to me, well, I don't want to donate this because I don't know where the money's going to go. But yet you'll go and pay $250 for a jacket at Myer. You don't ask where those profits are going. You don't care that the CEO there is getting, a $20 million bonus. Sorry, Myer. Look, you're just a department store I've named. I probably should edit that out. But major department stores, or people will go and pay for items and they don't ask where the profits are going. They just think, well, this is the price tag, I'll pay for it. And I think because they get something in return that they, in their mind, they think it's justified. But it's the way that they think that I want people to change. You question charities and say, well, where is my money going? That's a fair question to ask, but perhaps get to know us, volunteer with us, read our website and talk to us. You will find out where the money's going, and you'll find out that it actually does, 100% help people. I don't get a wage or salary from the charity. The only people that do are the women that we employ at the Carla space. How I get paid is if we get a grant and that grant has a project manager fee written into it, then I get that part, because it's written for me to manage the project. And that's fair enough. So if we go for a grant for perhaps for the period project, and say there's $10,000 in that grant that says, okay, that's for project managing, I'm the one that's managing it, that's how I get paid. So we work out with the grants how much project management grant funding we've received throughout the year, and that then turns into my salary. And that's how I get paid. Public funding goes to a completely separate account, and 100% of that gets spent back on the community. And yeah, we might have to pay the public liability out of that, but people should not expect that comes out of my pocket. We can't legally run the charity without public liability, and that's $3,000 a year that we have to fork out. So get to know the charities. Yeah, there's been some dodgy ones around. There's been some that have been caught red-handed. There's been some employees that have been caught red-handed as well. But you're going to find that in every single area of employment, in every single industry in this country, there are bad eggs everywhere. So you can't just say, well, I saw a charity and there was a person being dishonest, thus I don't trust the charity. If somebody had, there would be large department stores that have had to fire people because they were being dishonest. You don't just stop shopping there because someone got fired. So it's one of those things. People are just conditioned to think that if they give money to a charity, then they have every right to demand to know exactly where it goes and what's happening with the money. And it's exhausting. It really is exhausting. I'm busy enough trying to help people and trying to stop people from going back to situations where they're literally going to be murdered if they go back, or children sleeping on the street. To stop me and question me about where your $5 is going. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but get to know us, volunteer with us, and you'll see exactly where it's going. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant then, but
no, and you're absolutely entitled to, because you never ever stop working. And the most extraordinary thing on top of all of this is that you are the mother of 5 kids.
Yeah.
Grandmother to 2. Is that right? Good grief. I don't know where you find the time to do that and all of this, because really I imagine that a lot of you, these places, you're so passionate about these places, and for good reason. But you must, I don't know, do you ever get to sleep?
I sleep, but I don't get a day off. So I haven't had a day off this year. And that includes Saturdays and Sundays. I have not had one day off. I woke up to bushfires on New Year's Day, and we had intended to close the Carla space because we have a Christmas Day lunch at the Carla space for isolated single parents we hold on actual Christmas Day. So we decided to close the Carla space for 2 weeks after that. I think we lasted 3 days and the bushfires hit. So for the last few days of 2019 and for the first day of 2020, right up to this present day, I've not had a day off. I work every weekend, every day. And then, that's why it can get a little bit disappointing when people turn around and like, well, where's the money going? Like, I don't get paid enough for this. But I do have 5 children. They're all boys. So I'm very lucky to have five healthy sons. And my oldest son has 2 children, a boy and a girl. And my youngest son has a disability. He has autism and an intellectual disability. So he will need lifelong care. He will be living with us, until we leave the planet, really. But he was also a lot of the inspiration behind why I do what I do, because I also saw that the disability services were very ineffective. I mean, he's 12, so we didn't have NDIS back then. And a lot of the people I met on the street had disabilities that I could see that were just not addressed. And that was a huge underlying factor into why they ended up experiencing homelessness. And I decided I had to make a choice that I could either devote my life to making sure that my youngest son, Jay, was okay, or I could spend time helping other people who didn't have someone to help them. And I chose the latter because Jay has 4 older brothers and a wonderful father. So he already had a support crew. And of course, I'm still his mother and I'm still his advocate and I'm still, on his cheer squad. So he still has me, but the people that I saw out on the street didn't have anybody. So I just decided that I had to try and be as much for those people as what Jay needed and help them as much as I could.
I think this is what's so beautiful and incredible about you, in my eyes, is that you've got so much empathy because you've got lived experience. Like you are, you're a proud Indigenous woman as well. So you kind of understand or have a better understanding than a lot of other charities out there about the issues facing Indigenous communities. You've got a son, as you say, who has disability, and so you understand and have an empathy and a great understanding for what's going on within the disability sector as well. You're a woman, you understand what that is like, because let's face it, there's a lot of challenges that women face regardless of where they are in life, but you add homelessness to that, or rental insecurity or work insecurity to all of that. And there'd be a lot of single mums out there. I know for a fact there are a lot of single mums out there who are raising kids, but also raising children who have intellectual or physical disabilities as well, and not getting the support that they really deserve.
Exactly. And I spent many years as a single parent with my eldest 2 children as well. So I've also lived that life, and I've lived that life of having nowhere to go. And I know what that fear is like. And that was like 30 years ago. And nothing's changed. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me going the most, is that when I was going through it, it was hard enough to navigate back then. And there were a lot of gaps there, and there was so little support. I'm lucky that I was born very stubborn and have the competencies to sort of drag myself up and keep going. Not everybody has that, and not everybody's stubborn. And I don't know how I managed. I think I ended up getting back to family, and we were okay after that. I was very lucky to have a very supportive family. But when it's 30 years ago, there was no internet back then, and no one had mobile phones, so you couldn't just text somebody. And when I started this charity, I realized that very little had changed. Almost nothing had changed. The rates of domestic violence are still going through the roof. We've got awareness programs everywhere, but you know what? We're all aware that it's happening. And when someone's getting punches rained down on them, she doesn't care that you're aware of that. She cares that there's somewhere for her to go, and somewhere that's not going to be degrading to go, and somewhere that's not going to be safe for her. She cares about those things, and that's where I get asked to do a lot of like be an advocate and be active in a lot of political things. And I decline that because there are enough people on that side doing those things. I mean, as far as changing the employment landscape that we currently have in Australia, and changing this very disjointed, detached system that we have, I'm all for that. But as far as the advocacy work goes and the awareness raising goes, that's not for me. I'm more like, okay, you go make people aware, and I'll go put someone in a hotel room. I'll go actually pick them up physically and take them to the hotel, or give their kids a school bag, or give them a food hamper, or make sure that this person's got a sleeping bag. I'm right there physically with them, and I can't do both. I get asked all the time. I remember one of the politicians I talked to said to me, oh, look, you need to start a little bit of, what did he call it? Disruptive activism. You need to do a bit of a protest. You need to do this. And I'm just like, no, buddy, that's not for me. That's other people's work to do. I'm busy doing what I'm doing and trying to raise. We're aware of domestic violence. We're very aware of it. We're very aware of homelessness. What people are not aware of is why this is happening. The systems that we've created that are ineffective, we need to fight those things and get them fixed, because I can tell you that when I was going through it 30 years ago, nothing's changed, and all this awareness is needed. But awareness without action, that's just apathy. That's just you've liked a post, you've shared a post, you've done something, but awareness without action, it's really nothing. You need to put your awareness into action and have a call to action and actually follow it through, and get those people that you're making people aware of what's going on, get a call to action and make sure that you follow through with it, and make sure that all of those people are actually doing something about it. And if people don't know what to do about it, ask me, listen to this podcast.
I love that. And I love that you said, I don't have time to be an activist or to be an advocate, because, I'm out on that front line, which you are every day. But the reality is what you are doing is everyday activism, which really, you have put your money literally where your mouth is, your energy, your time, your courage, you're on that front line, and you're supporting people who without your organizations would not get any support at all.
Yeah, we do. We put that awareness into action, and we just get the job done, and we just make it happen as much as we can. We're at that stage at the moment with the charity where we've gone from, I accidentally started this charity. I was working for the government before I collected that first blanket, and had no idea that this is what I'd be doing. 3 months later, it was 3 months after I collected that first blanket, that I quit my job to run the charity full time, because it just blew up and I had to make a choice. It was either the charity or my job, so I chose the charity. And I'm now at that point where we'll be 6 years old in March, and we have so many organizations needing our support. So we're now getting a lot more known out there, and where a lot more people are aware of us. So it's we're you're right, we're activists because we actually do the support. We do help, and we do make changes. I guess what I was talking about is more people who raise awareness, and they're definitely people that we need. But I get asked to do both. Oh, why, come and join us on this thing, and come and do this, and come and do that, and you should be, staging protests and things like that. You should be getting people in disruptive, there's a term for it, I can't remember, but disruptive activism or something like that, and protesting on street corners and things. And I'm just like, I don't have time. I seriously don't. I could do it, but then that means someone wouldn't get help that day that that actually needed it. So everybody has a bit to do, and everybody can do something. Everybody can. I always say, if everybody who could help did help, everyone would have help. And sometimes awareness raising is not all you can do. It's nice to raise awareness, it's good, but there are other things that I think people can probably do as well.
And so let's talk about the ways that, anybody listening to this, and, our magazine gets launched basically this month. So they'll be reading all about you in that as well. But anybody who's listening to this, let's talk about some of the ways that they can help and genuinely help.
The first step to it is actually to learn first. Before you jump into help, you need to learn about what it is that you're doing and why your help is needed, because you can help an organization or help people, but if you don't understand the why behind it and what the problem is, then you're not going to be really able to grasp exactly what it is that you're helping for, and really carry that through. So there are a lot of practical things people can do to help. The first one, I'm just unabashedly say it, donate money, because if you donate money, that's more hotel rooms that I can pay for, more rent and bond, more clothes for kids, things like that we can get people to do immediately. But come and see us. If you work for a large organization, ask to have a homeless awareness session. Do a fundraiser at your work. Learn about what the real aspects of homelessness are and what you think they are. Learn about what the real challenges are and what you think they are. Everyone can go to their local MP, especially when it comes to election time, make an appointment, write a letter and say, what are your policies on homelessness? What are you actually doing to support people experiencing homelessness? And if you get a letter back, write back to them and say, well, can you show me examples of this? Because the louder people get, the more the politicians have to be moved into action. If you put, like I've got Google alerts on homelessness and domestic violence, put those on your email and see how completely disjointed this is. One study here, one person there, one this here, one that there. There's a whole mess of people out there, little bubbles trying to work in like separate, and nothing's actually getting done. Sorry, we're going off on a tangent here. I guess, the first thing, is understanding organisations like mine helping us. Come and shop at the Carla Space, 50 Logan Street, Brunswick East. Tell people about it, whatever the organisation, share fundraisers, share awareness, things like that. We often put posts up about situations that we are supporting people with to keep that awareness going of, look, this is why this person's in this situation and these are the barriers they're facing. Read them, share them, get to know what's happening out there, arm yourself with that knowledge. And that way, when you see an opportunity to help, you'll recognise it for what it is, and you'll be able to jump in there and help. But I think for me, the biggest one is that I'm trying to change the perception of homelessness. So I want people to be willing to learn about it and stop the pity brigade. People sort of, oh, I saw an old man and he was so cute and I bought him a coffee, and that just makes my blood boil. But they're people and they don't need your pity. Something's happened. There's been something going on in their life, most likely since they were an infant, and that issue hasn't been addressed. So join us in that awareness of learning about what it actually is that causes homelessness. Write to your politicians, share the posts, get involved, do something about it, and look out for any call to action that we put on our page, because we will have separate ones depending on what's actually happening at the time. So what we'll call for in March is completely different to what we call for in December, and it changes. So for us, I think other organisations are different. They're structured differently. As far as domestic violence goes, come on, this is just, it's infuriating and it's exhausting. Call it out. If you see it happening, if it's your mate that's doing it, if it's your girlfriend that's doing it, don't be afraid to call it out and tell that person they need help because they're not coping with something and they really need to get something done about the way they're treating their partner or their parent or their children.
And it's really nice, I think, to see finally, organisations are now giving leave for people who do need to flee domestic violence. That's great. But wouldn't it be wonderful if large organisations were not only doing that, but offering financial support to those people in the organisations who are actually helping those people get out of that situation?
It would be fantastic, but I'd take it back a step further and say that what we need to do is, I talked earlier that I do acknowledge that females are perpetrators, but the large part of perpetrators of violence are males, and we're talking about male behaviour. What would be better is if we went back and addressed male behaviour and put in more male behaviour change programs, so that the person didn't need the leave in the first place because the violence didn't happen in the first place. We've normalised it. The papers are saturated. We've got this domestic violence fatigue and we're reading about it all the time, and we don't get horrified until we hear of a really horrific story where someone set alight and burnt to death. Because if the paper said woman bashed by husband, we'd be like, well, okay, turn the page, what else is over there, because that just happens every day. And it's so normalized in this society that whether people say they're horrified with it or not, it's accepted. It really is. And one of the other things that is a contributing factor is the continuous bail of people who breach IVOs. If there's an IVO on someone, if you look at a murder case or a DV case, you will often see an IVO breach, and the person is bailed, and they're bailed, and they're bailed. And, something's got to happen with that. There's got to be tougher penalties for people who are bailing. But it really does start with male behaviour change programs and addressing the root causes of the violence and the root causes of that frustration, and why is that person taking it out on their partner. And if you address that, if you stop the actual violence and not focus so much on what we have to do at the moment is support the victims. Our charity is all about supporting the victims. And I would rather that we didn't have any victims in the first place. And people might think that that's too much of a challenge, but it really isn't. We need to look at the causes of this and go back to the very first step. And even with, I know people don't have sympathy for people who are perpetrators of domestic violence, but there is often a cause that, not a cause, there is often a reason the person is behaving that way that was unaddressed. As an adult, you are responsible for your behaviors, you are responsible for your own anger, you are responsible for everything that you choose to do. If you're choosing to harm another person, you need to acknowledge that and get yourself some support and get yourself some help. But where is that help? How do they find it? How do they fit that into their daily life? How do they reduce the shame around that and actually pick up the phone or put their hand up and actually call for help? That's where we need to get back to. Every perpetrator is responsible for their own actions. They are the ones that need to call for that help themselves. But we've got to have that help in place. We have to have that structure there. We have to have those systems there so that the person can get the help. And then if the help is there and the violence stops, the families stay together, you've stopped that whole chain of events that makes a charity like mine even needed. I remember, I think my first week when we started the Melbourne Period Project, and a radio station was very excited about what we do, and they rang up and their last question to me was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And my answer was, hopefully obsolete. Hopefully we're not here. Hopefully the government did what they wanted to do. And I think they thought my answer would be, we're going to be worldwide, we're going to be everywhere. But I knew even back then that we should not have been even in existence giving sanitary items to people experiencing homelessness. I mean, why was that not addressed? I mean, back then it was even taxed. There was a tampon tax. So you look back and it's absolutely horrific when you think about it. But we were not addressing it. The horse is bolted and we're trying to catch it. Whereas if we work out, okay, what's causing the problem, and fund that and put more awareness into why does the violence actually happen, then we stop that whole chain that happens, further down the track.
Absolutely. And I feel like we've got a long way to catch up before that happens. And unfortunately, I can't see you being obsolete, your organisation being obsolete for a very long time. And it's a shame, and on that note as well, it's how do we deal with systemic homelessness as a society and as a government, and I think that sadly in this country and a number of countries are falling really far behind on that. Which Definitely. Is why organisations like yours are so desperately needed.
Yeah, and one of the issues too, because homelessness is caused mainly by housing affordability, the inability to afford to rent. And that rental problem is one of the biggest issues. Now, I know, like I said before, 45% of women experiencing homelessness are there because of domestic violence, but the other 55% pretty much there because they can't afford to rent a home. And the cost of buying a house is so high now that I think it was, there are some amazing statistics coming out about it when you actually look at it. The cost of rental properties, just the market is crazy, and people just simply cannot afford to rent anymore either. So people are living with that really stressful, almost like month by month basis when your leases run out and you're trying to scrape the money together. There really does need to be more support, and it has to be from every single level of government to help fund the rent for people, cap the landlords, the amount of money that they can actually charge for rent. We've got bonds that go into like black holes of like no interest bearing accounts. You pay a bond, and even if you're in a house for 10 years, you get back the same amount of bond that you paid, yet you're not going to be able to use that for your next house because it's only going to be half the amount. So the bond needs to go in an interest bearing account that is either given to the tenant or put into a superannuation fund for the tenant. And there are so many factors there that we can address. If we sort out what's happening with the rentals is as the prices go up, the people with the money take the houses. They can't afford to buy a house, but they can afford to rent a house. Then what happens is those on the lower socioeconomic scale are pushed further and further out, because the closer to a city, the higher the rent. Further away from the city, the further away you are from services. So we've got the people with less money living much further away from services, more likely to move. They lose contact with family, with friends, with their history, which also causes trauma. Constant moving costs more money. So it actually, that system of housing and affordability, it creates a secondary issue of people having to spend more money to be able to keep a roof over their head. And because they're further away from services, the children then don't get to have everything that they need, especially if there are health issues. With my son's disability, I mean, I live in the west of Melbourne, and I know all the specialists that he needs are all over in the east. There's very, very few in the west. So I'm fortunate that I can pay for that, and I can get him to where he needs to go. But there's a lot of families that can't fix that rental debacle that we've got in this country, with all of our capital cities being in the top 20 hardest places to find an appropriate rental. That's appalling. Australia we can't call ourselves a lucky country and have that situation going on. And I can't remember the statistics, and I can probably get them for you, but it's crazy the amount of people now who, compared to say the year 2000, who can't afford to buy a house. The amount of people renting has just skyrocketed. And those who have, like a dual income, take the higher price rentals that are closer to the city. The other people get bumped out. That whole system needs to be looked at as well, because that is it's a direct factor in homelessness. Address that. Social housing, like I know that in Victoria we've just had a massive investment into social housing, but I don't think that there'd been any major investment since like around about the year 2000 or something like that. And that's another factor as well. Where do we put people? We can support people, but where do we put them when there is no social housing? We need more build to rent properties. We need, if we got a system where we had build to rent or build to rent to buy, then we create massive amounts of jobs. The economy lifts up. We've got more houses for people to live in, and a lot more people are secure, less likely to need those other support services that we're pummeling money into right now, because just to try and keep people going. If you flip it around and just give people houses and support them that way, then the entire system will change. But that's what I'm saying about, when we ask how can people help, like learn about that. There's some really good resources out there and reports out there that can show you exactly what's happening. You need to understand the why. Why are people not able to afford rent? Why are people not able to buy a house? Why is domestic violence happening? All of those things, so that we can understand. If you don't understand why, you don't understand how to stop it.
It's so true. It's so true. And I will put up links, obviously, to your site, and because there's a lot of information there as well for people to dive in, and it's a really good place to start to learn. I wanted to say a big congratulations to you too, Donna, because you are the Victorian I don't know how to say this. You're the recipient. That's the word I was looking for. You're the Victorian recipient of Australian of the Year for 2021.
Yes.
And deservedly so. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It was a huge shock. I think it is for every recipient to even be nominated. We're so busy doing the work that we never look up. And I remember getting the email that I've been nominated. I'm like, oh, that's nice, but they don't tell you who nominated you. And then I got the phone call saying that I was a finalist, and that kind of blew me away because I thought, okay, so I'm in the top 100, and they said, no, you're in the top 4. You're actually an actual finalist now. And that to me was insane. It was crazy. It was amazing. But then to win it was, first of all, it was a shock, of course, but then, they said to us, look, it is going to be a shock for whoever wins it, but, this is your chance now. So I kind of feel like, just crazy analogy, but, Alexander Hamilton from the Hamilton, like, I'm not giving away my shot. Like, I've got this 1 year where I hold this trophy, and I am the 2021 Victorian Australian of the Year. And I plan to use that to create a lot of noise out there and get people thinking and really get people to finally take a good hard look at this mess of a system we've got and come up with a way to change it. Because 30 years ago, this is what it was like. And I don't want to be here in another 30 years and going, well, we're still going. It can be changed. We're just so used to doing things this way. So, yeah, if any of the politicians who listen to this podcast will probably be banned from their office.
And yet really they should be embracing you. And the really interesting thing is, now that you are the Victorian Australian of the Year, hopefully they will listen to you, and that this will open many, many more doors to make your job easier and to get more and more organisations and money coming through the door, right?
I hope so. Look, I hope that we can really affect some great change here and stop those levels of bureaucracy that stop things from actually getting done, because it's such an ineffective system. It's such an ineffective and costly way to do things, and we could be putting money into other things. So I hope they do listen. I've had a few organisations already take the time to meet with me, listen, and then we have some follow-up meetings coming up. So if all goes to plan, then hopefully, within 12 months, we will at least have the start of a very different system that we might be able to put into place to stop that cycle and there's a crazy number of people tumbling into homelessness, which is just completely unacceptable.
Yeah, well, I will say that as a fellow Melburnian and as a fellow Westie and as a woman who was also at one stage a single mother who was really doing it tough, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you do out there on the front line, supporting women and men and children in our communities and really helping people to understand what is really going on out there.
Thank you so much, Sandy. It's it's an absolute honour to be on your podcast and to be able to thank you for helping me share my voice, because without outlets like yours, people don't hear me unless they're listening to my rant on my own Facebook page or something. Thank you for this opportunity. And, if anybody wants to know more, get in touch. I don't have a PA. Everything that gets done is done by me. So it may take me a few weeks to get back to you, but I eventually get back to you. As you well know, like it takes me so long to get back to you, but eventually it happens. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Oh no, look, it's me that's completely honoured that I know how busy you are. I know the extraordinary amount of work that you do, and as you say, haven't had a day off all year, and I'm taking up your serious coffee time and break time. So I can't thank you enough, Donna, for coming on the podcast. I think what you're doing is incredible. And thank you
so much. It's been great to chat about what we do.
Thank you. Fantastic talking to you. It's been a delight. Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to your quality podcasts. We chat to really interesting women telling their amazing stories, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for all of your support. Bye for now.